He stood in front of the mirror and did not recognize a man staring back. Not because he looked different, but because he was still there, alive. He touched his own face slowly, as if confirming something impossible. Skin, bone, breath, and then, quietly, almost like a confession, he whispered, "Why me?" Outside, the world was celebrating the end of war. Inside, something far darker had just begun. Because for some survivors, survival was not relief. It was a burden. The war did not end in a single moment. It ended in fragments, in broken cities reduced to ash, in silence where families once lived, in camps where death had become routine. Across Europe, millions had vanished. In places like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Dachau, survival was never guaranteed. It was random, arbitrary. Cool, a step to the left, a glance from a guard, a body too weak to stand. That was all it took. And outside the camps, in cities like Dresden, London, and Tokyo, bombs fell without warning. Entire neighborhoods erased overnight. One moment, a family ate dinner together. The next, only one chair remained occupied. War did not just kill people. It separated the living from the dead in ways no one could understand. And for those who remained, the question began to grow. Why am I still here? In the camps, survival often meant watching others die. Not once, not occasionally, but every single day. Men learned not to look at the faces beside them, because those faces might not be there tomorrow. Women memorized the sound of footsteps at night, knowing they could be taken at any moment. Children learned silence, because noise could mean punishment. And sometimes survival required choices. Unthinkable choices. A piece of bread kept for yourself while someone else starved. A moment of strength when another collapsed. A stroke of luck when someone else was chosen. There was no fairness, no logic, only survival. And when liberation finally came, it did not feel like victory. It felt like confusion. Because those who survived were not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most deserving. They were simply the ones who remained. His name was Daniel. Before the war, he was a quiet boy from a small town in Poland. He liked books. He liked music. He believed the world made sense. Then the war came. His family was taken in the early days. His father disappeared first. His mother followed. His younger sister he never saw again. Daniel was sent to a camp. At first, he thought it was temporary. Everyone did. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Months into something that no longer had a name. Hunger became constant. Fear became normal. And death became familiar. He stopped asking when it would end. Instead, he started asking something else. How do I make it through today? Daniel survived things he could never explain. Once, he was lined up with others during a selection. A guard walked past, pointing left, then right. Left meant labor. Right meant death. Daniel felt his heart pounding so loudly, he thought it would give him away. When the guard reached him, he hesitated, just for a second, then pointed left. The man behind Daniel was sent right. Daniel never knew why. Another time, he fell ill, too weak to stand, too weak to work. Illness in the camp was a death sentence. But that day, chaos broke out. Orders were confused. Guards were distracted. He was overlooked, forgotten. And because he was forgotten, he lived. Each moment of survival felt less like luck and more like something else, something heavier. Because every time he survived, someone else didn't. When the camp was finally liberated, Daniel expected to feel something. Relief, joy, gratitude. But instead, he felt nothing. No tears, no laughter, just emptiness. The gates were open. The guard were gone. But he didn't know where to go, or who he was without the camp. He stepped outside, and the world felt unreal. Too quiet, too wide, too normal. People spoke to him, but their voices sounded distant. They told him he was free. But freedom did not feel like freedom. It felt like standing in a place where everything familiar had been erased. And then, slowly, the thoughts began. At night, Daniel couldn't sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw faces. Not strangers, People he knew, the man who stood beside him in line, the boy who shared his bread, the woman who sang quietly at night, all gone, all replaced by silence. And in that silence, one question echoed louder than anything else. Why did I live? He tried to answer it. Maybe he was stronger, but he remembered the stronger men who died. Maybe he was smarter, but he remembered the clever ones who didn't make it. Maybe it was luck, but luck felt like an insult, because if it was luck, then their deaths were meaningless, and that was something he could not accept. So instead, his mind turned against him. He began to believe something else. I should have died too. The thought didn't come all at once. It grew slowly, quietly. At first, it was just a feeling, a discomfort when he ate, knowing others had starved, a hesitation when he laughed, knowing others never would again. Then it became guilt, heavy, persistent, unavoidable. He would sit in a room full of people and feel like he didn't belong, because he was living a life that others had been denied. Every moment of normalcy felt wrong. Every step forward felt like a betrayal. He began asking himself questions he could never answer. Did I do something they didn't? Did I take someone else's place? Was my life worth more than theirs? There were no answers, only silence. After the war, Daniel tried to rebuild his life. He moved to a new country, got a job, met people who had never seen what he had seen. They asked him about the past. He avoided it, because how do you explain something that doesn't make sense? How do you describe a world where survival feels like failure? He looked in the mirror again years later, and still, he didn't recognize a man staring back. Not because of what had changed, but because of what remained. The memories, the guilt, the feeling that he was living a life that didn't belong to him. He wasn't just Daniel anymore. He was the one who survived. And that identity felt like a weight he could never put down. Some nights, Daniel would walk alone, long after the streets were empty. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay still, because staying still meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. He stopped caring about things. Food lost its taste. Conversations felt pointless. Time passed, but nothing changed inside him. There were moments, quiet, dangerous moments, when he wondered if survival had been a mistake. Not because he wanted to die, but because living felt undeserved. Like he had taken something that was never meant for him. Something that belonged to someone else. People often imagine survival as a victory, a moment of triumph. But for Daniel, survival became something else entirely. A responsibility, a question, a wound that never healed. Because every day he lived, he carried the memory of those who didn't. And that memory did not fade. It grew. It followed him into every room, every conversation, every quiet moment. Survival meant remembering. Survival meant asking questions with no answers. Survival meant living with the constant feeling that something was wrong, that the world had made a mistake, and he was the evidence. Daniel was not alone. Across Europe and beyond, survivors carried the same burden. In cities destroyed by bombs, civilians who lived through firestorms felt it too. A mother who survived while her children didn't. A man who stepped outside moments before his home collapsed. A child pulled from rubble while others remained buried. They all shared the same question. Why me? And like Daniel, they found no answers. Only the weight of survival. Years passed. Decades. The world moved on. But for Daniel, the war never truly ended. It lived inside him, in memories, in silence, in the quiet moments when everything else faded away. One day, someone asked him a simple question. What does it mean to survive? Daniel thought for a long time. Then he answered, it means you keep living, even when part of you didn't. He paused, his voice barely above a whisper. And sometimes that's the hardest part, because survival is not just about staying alive. It is about carrying everything that was lost, every face, every voice, every moment that never got to continue. And for some, that weight never gets lighter. It simply becomes part of who they are, a constant reminder that they lived when so many others didn't. Survival saved their lives, but it also gave them a question they would carry forever, a question with no answer. Only silence. Why me?